You want to know which running back should be in your lineup for week 13 and who you should avoid? Stay tuned to find out. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button before the end so you don't miss any of our videos every week. All right, let's kick it off with your first RB must start, Chris.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's David Montgomery. And no, this isn't just an overreaction to last week, but I think you can look at last week and expect something similar this week because David Montgomery had a great matchup last week against Green Bay, put up monster fantasy numbers. I know a lot of that was in garbage time, but it doesn't matter. They still count. Well, he gets an even better matchup this week against Detroit, who might be the worst run defense in the NFL, especially when it comes to fantasy points and running backs. They've given up a league-high 17 touchdowns to running backs. Every single running back that plays Detroit has a great game against them. I said it a couple weeks back when Mike Davis had 4 games in a row of doing nothing. I said, don't worry, he plays Detroit this week, he'll be fine. And then he went out and got you 15 fantasy points. David Montgomery, we know he's going to get the touches. Even in garbage time, we saw he'll get the touches, he'll get dump-offs. So the volume will be there. And in this matchup, he should have a great game.
Yeah, and Montgomery looked really good actually last week. Early on, of course, ripped off that big run. I always think that he gets a little bit unfairly dogged just because he is in the Bears. That whole offense is a little questionable, especially the coaching. But I will say with Mitch Trubisky, he kind of proved he's not a great quarterback in the making anymore. But that offense isn't worse with him than at Nick Foles. So I'm fine starting Montgomery. I think they know they have to run the ball if they even want a chance going forward. And they're still in the wild card race, believe it or not. So I'm going to go the guy, speaking of not overreacting to last week, going the opposite way, a guy who just was terrible, very disappointed to see Miles Sanders do nothing. Not his fault, though. He's still a good back. He didn't get the ball but 6 times. What can you do if you only get the ball 6 times? Okay, so that's on Doug Peterson's hand. But anyways, I think Philly, again, a lot of heat coming down on the coach. Of course, Carson Wentz, that pass offense is really shaky. They've got to give him the ball more. I think they know that. If not, Peterson should probably be fired on the spot. But I feel Sanders is going to have a lot of carries in this one. And going against one of the worst run defenses in the league, also in that same division, that's Green Bay. So you only have to hope that maybe Green Bay doesn't really run away with it early and force it so that Philly can't run the ball. But even so, Sanders doesn't need a lot of volume. He's never going to be a guy that gets 20-plus carries anyways, but he doesn't need that. He can rip off a big run at any time, so don't panic. Don't pull the plug on him just because of last week. You definitely want to start him in this matchup.
Yeah, and this is the team that David Montgomery just played last week, and we saw what he could do. I know it was rough if you have Miles Sanders on Monday night, but I agree with you. Don't panic just because of that one game. This is a great matchup. He's still a very good running back, and you got to think Philly will want to get him more involved and take the ball out of Wentz's hands if they can, or at least they should. Then my next must start. This one is very painful for me because it's not Alvin Kamara, it's Latavius Murray. Yes, that's right. Taysom Hill has somehow made Latavius Murray more valuable in fantasy than Alvin Kamara. So if you look 2 weeks ago when they played Atlanta, the first start for Taysom Hill, Latavius Murray had 12 carries and 2 receptions. Alvin Kamara had 0 receptions in that game. I'm sure you know that by now. And 85 total yards. That might not sound like a lot, but we saw last week he looked even better, and you got to think he's going to be plenty involved again. And if he scores a touchdown, you're going to be extremely happy. I know Taysom Hill could vulture touchdowns. That's kind of what he does. He vultures receptions from Alvin Kamara, and he vultures touchdowns from everybody else. But Latavius Murray found the end zone last week. I think he'll find the end zone again. And given the fact that he's probably going to be looking at 15-plus touches in this one, I think he's a must start.
Yeah, and again, this matchup, a repeat of a couple of weeks ago. We're seeing that a lot in the NFL, a lot of 2-week gaps between rematches. And Murray wasn't too bad. I was a little disappointed, honestly, because in that first game against Atlanta, I thought we were going to see a lot of Murray and didn't see quite as much. And, of course, last week, I wasn't on him, and that's when he kind of smashed. My next must start, though, is going to be Chris Carson going against the Giants. This isn't necessarily a smash spot. And I know, again, with Carson, he didn't get the ball a whole lot last week. He still outproduced Carlos Hyde. You say, well, why is Hyde getting more touches than Carson? Well, obviously it's not because they like Hyde better. It's because Carson had missed several weeks, working his way back. They don't want to push him. They really didn't need to. because they were going against Philadelphia. But I think Carson gets a little bit more involved this week. He's obviously going to be more effective than Hyde or any other running back they trot out there. And again, the Giants going with a backup quarterback, their defense hasn't been bad all season, but I don't think they're going to offer a whole lot of resistance. They've been better against the pass, really. So I feel good about Carson as a solid RB2. I'm not saying he's necessarily going to blow up this week, but don't entertain thoughts of replacing him with a trendier pick or somebody else. You got to keep Carson in your lineup.
Yeah, I think that was just a case of Seattle easing him back. And to be honest, Carlos Hyde was playing fine. He was playing well in pass protection. So there's no reason to give Chris Carson a huge workload. But I think this week we see him back to his more normal workload. And like I said, against the Giants, especially with Colt McCoy starting. And that Seattle defense is healthy. And the addition of Carlos Dunlap, they're playing a lot better. So game script should be on his side as well. Like you said, definitely like Chris Carson. And then my final must start, old man Frank Gore. Since LaMichael Pirine went on IR in the last 2 games, Frank Gore has 33 carries and 5 receptions. That's the huge part to me, is he's had 5 receptions over the last 2 games. So it's not like he's just getting carries. He's actually getting the ball thrown to him. Now I get it. He doesn't score any touchdowns because it's the Jets and they don't score touchdowns, but they get Las Vegas this week. Las Vegas is tied with Detroit, also having given up 17 touchdowns to running backs. So I think this is the week Frank Gore finds the end zone. It might be the only touchdown the Jets get, but that's okay. So give me a guy getting, 15 plus carries, 2 to 3 catches, and a touchdown. I'll take that every week. I think Frank Gore is a solid RB2 that you got to start this week.
Yeah, there's a handful, I'd say maybe 5 running backs right now who could be considered workhorse backs, meaning they're going to get almost all the carries in their backfield. And Frank Gore is one of them. I mean, they show zero interest in giving any other running back a chance. Now the Pirine's on IR. You can't ignore that, right? The guy who's going to get touches, that's worth something, especially if he is getting receptions. And then for the first time officially all season long, I'm calling Jonathan Taylor a must start. This might be the last time, but let me tell you, this is an interesting situation because Jordan Wilkins was looking like a good pickup for this week because Houston's defense, one of the worst rush defenses in the league. But now we're seeing that Wilkins, according to his head coach, is banged up, quote unquote. So there's a chance that Wilkins might not play or give me limited. Taylor, I know, missed last week because of COVID protocol, didn't have it, but was a close contact. Well, he's going to come back. And in this matchup, if Wilkins is out and Taylor, who actually was pretty good, if we remember the last game he played, got 90 yards, this could be his breakout week. I mean, technically he's had already one, but this could be the start of a trend, especially if Wilkins is out. Taylor owners, this is what you've been waiting for. Get him in your lineup.
Yeah, against Houston, you got to think, and look, Will Fuller just got suspended for PEDs. So that's going to be a big blow to Houston's offense. I got to think Indy's defense is going to bounce back. This isn't going to be like last week where they're down, 35-14 at the half and all they can do is throw the ball. They're going to be able to run. They're going to be able to control the clock, which is what they want to do anyways. And like you said, against this run defense, you got to start Jonathan Taylor. It's just too good of a matchup.
Yeah, great point there too. Houston not necessarily going to pile up the points like they might have in weeks past. This is another matchup here. We're going to see these two teams play each other within the span of 2 weeks. I don't know why the NFL just seems that's the thing this year, I guess. All right, so gave you some of our must starts. Always talk about this. You have to play based on matchup. You can't go by name recognition only. And so with that, you're going to hear some surprising names in our must sits. So Chris, I'll let you lead off here. Who is your first must sit?
Yeah, I don't know if this is a surprise. It's Ezekiel Elliott. I just don't see how you can start Ezekiel Elliott this week. Going against Baltimore, the defense should be relatively healthy next week, right? They'll get a bunch of guys back that are on the COVID list. He's been losing touches to Tony Pollard. He's not getting that bell cow workload, not even close to that bell cow workload. So I just don't see what you expect. If you're starting Ezekiel Elliott, I don't know what you're hoping for, like 2 goal line scores. I don't know. He's not catching passes. He's getting 10 carries. So I think you got to bench Ezekiel Elliott this week.
Yeah, these days, if you're paying attention and you're really, obviously if you have Zeke on your roster, you already know this. He's not an RB1 this year. He's just not, maybe not completely his own fault because of the whole Dak Prescott situation, but take this. He's only scored one touchdown, and it wasn't on the ground. It was receiving touchdown, one touchdown since week 5. He has 100-yard game on the ground all season long. That's it. That's not an RB1. So a negative matchup, a lot of issues there. Yeah, I think we can call him a must sit. And then I know Antonio Gibson has been on fire lately, but again, if you look into the stats, dig into the game logs, you'll realize, number one, a lot of his points are coming from touchdowns, which is not a bad thing if you're consistently scoring touchdowns, and he is. But really, he is one who benefits from these weak matchups, and lately has had a lot of weak matchups for run defenses. And in negative matchups, he completely struggles. It's like not start worthy at all. And that's the case this week going against the Steelers. We're going to talk about that really tough run defense. This is the Steelers defense that's been a top run defense all year long. And then Gibson, he has only gone over 65 yards, total yards, rushing and receiving 4 times this year. Those matchups were Cincinnati, Baltimore, and the Cowboys twice. Okay, so if he's not scoring a touchdown, which he might, even so, he could get shut down. And we know that the Washington football team could easily abandon the run if they get down early. And it's very possible that they get down early. So Gibson is just really risky for me, especially in PPR leagues.
Yeah, Gibson has been so efficient this year with his touches that I don't think people realize that he's not really getting elite level touches. He's just doing a lot with them. So to your point, yeah, in a tough matchup like Pittsburgh, where you got to think Washington's probably not going to score a lot of points. They could be down, big to them, although the Steelers do kind of play to the level of their competition, so maybe not. But even still, you got with his limited touches against his defense, like you said, he's going to have to be hyper efficient with them or find the end zone if he's going to have any value. Absolutely. And then my final must sit is Melvin Gordon. Now, I know Philip Lindsay left the game last week with injury, so there's a chance he may not play, and you may be thinking, all right, it's going to be all Melvin Gordon, but guess what? That doesn't matter, okay? They're playing against KC. Now, KC isn't a shutdown run defense by any stretch. That's not what I'm worried about here with Melvin Gordon. What I'm worried about with Melvin Gordon is that the Broncos go down 2, 3, 4 scores in this one, and he never sees the ball the rest of the game because they're forced to just, be in comeback mode, which they are forced to be in most games. And if you look at the last time these two teams played, I believe Philip Lindsay, he may have played that game or may not have, I'm not sure. But Melvin Gordon only got you 12 fantasy points, and that was with a touchdown. You take out that touchdown, he gets you 6 fantasy points. So if you're starting Melvin Gordon this week, you're just hoping and praying that he finds the end zone because I don't see any other way that he returns decent fantasy value.
Yeah, Gordon, another one of these guys that really, other than a couple of games that have just gone their way, positive game script, which doesn't happen too often for the Broncos this year, he's really been unstartable most of the year. So I don't see it happening against KC. Like you said, they should have their quarterbacks back, but really having Drew Lock back, is that a reason to get super excited? I don't think so. And then I'll end things with a must sit. Guy was actually must start last week. You recommended Duke Johnson, and that was a good choice. Came back with 17 points in PPR leagues, but that was a good matchup. Here's a bad one. Going against Indy, I already mentioned in that game, you said no Will Fuller. They're short on receivers, and going against a really tough defense, it's going to be a slugfest probably. I just don't feel it because Duke Johnson, you wouldn't think it, but he's kind of touchdown dependent too, because even though he's thought of more as a receiving back, he really hasn't gotten that many receptions this year. And we know he's very limited on the ground, hasn't had any big games really on the ground. They're going to try to spread the ball around. They're going to be pass first as they have been. I just don't see it happening for him in this game. So I think you can definitely find options with a much higher floor.
Yeah, you got your one great game out of Duke Johnson last week. Probably not going to get you much this week, like you said. And David Johnson has entered his 21-day kind of period to come off of IR, so he could be back, next by as early as next week, which would then make Duke Johnson completely irrelevant again. So I hope you enjoyed it last week, but do not start him again this week.
No, that's actually a good point. If you're still playing the waiver wire, you might want to actually drop and stash somebody else with higher upside too. All right, well, that does it for running back start sit. Thanks for watching. If you need help at other positions, we've got you covered at wide receiver, quarterback, tight end. Check out those videos and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss all the latest. All right, thanks and good luck in week 13.